One thing that I've learned is I think that the Trump moment is passing. I think that when you look at the nationwide results, there's actually a point in the election last night where every Republican-backed governor who had been backed by Donald Trump had lost to the Democratic opponent. Whereas Republican-backed governors like DeSantis, who didn't receive Trump's blessing, won and won handily. And that suggests to me that maybe voters around the country have moved past the Trump phenomenon, at least on the national level. And I think it's good for us to be reminded that it's not simply enough to make people angry. You have to have ideas. You have to demonstrate an ability to lead. And hopefully that's a lesson that our politicians will learn going into the next election cycle. I think there are two key races that have been decided that are going to be really important. And I think there are a couple that haven't been decided. The Florida governor's race is going to be very telling because we all assume that the governor of Florida is preparing to challenge Trump for control of the Republican Party. And the fact that DeSantis was able to win the state and win it as convincingly as he did in his re-election bid suggests that he has all the tools that he needs to challenge for dominance in the GOP. The Senate seat in Pennsylvania was also really important because upon that seat is probably what's going to hang the balance of power in the United States Senate. We still have a couple of races that have yet to be decided. I think that those are going to be really important. The Georgia race is going to go to a runoff almost certainly. Warnock has the lead as we're recording this, but it's not going to be enough to clear the 50% hurdle. So that's going to become an important race going forward. And I'm really paying a close attention to the Arizona race because it looks like the GOP has a good chance at winning Nevada. But the Dems have a pretty decent lead in Arizona, and so they can hold on to the Arizona Senate seat and then also pick up Georgia, which looks likely that they're going to keep it, then the Dems would maintain control of the Senate. Coming from Texas, people used to ask me a lot if I thought that Texas was going to flip to the Democratic Party because of the size of the Hispanic vote, and I kept explaining to people that you're making this false assumption that the Hispanic population is monolithic and that it never changes its mind. And Florida has been a great indicator of that what we're seeing in Florida is that the Cuban population particularly has been slowly drifting from the Democratic camp to the Republican camp. And that's causing effectively an earthquake in the Florida election. Whereas for most of my life, Florida has been considered a swing state, the shift in the Hispanic population there, especially the Cuban population, I think has put Florida firmly into the Republican camp. And if that same shift translates to other Hispanic communities, the Mexican population in the Southwest, I think it's going to suggest the Republican Party is going to be much stronger going forward than maybe what it has been along the border in the past. There are two different types of pollsters. There's the ones like the RCP, Real Clear Politics averages, that just dump all the polls into one. And whereas they did fairly well in 2020, they've largely missed the mark. They were expecting a large red wave because of how they were not weighting their polls. And it's largely on the basis of some of that evidence that we thought that the Republican Party might get 35 or 40 seats in the House of Representatives. More sophisticated polls, those that aggregate individual polls and try to balance them based upon past performance, like at 538.com, they've been much closer. They were much more accurate in terms of predicting how the campaign would go. They still under-predicted, I think, Democrat support, but they were a little bit better. In terms of races that have been the most shocking for me, I think the size of DeSantis' victory in Florida was surprising. And honestly, I think that the size of the victory in the Pennsylvania Senate race was also surprising. I think most people thought that Dr. Oz would do a little bit better, considering that his opponent had a stroke recently and was not doing particularly well at communicating his ideas or his issues on the campaign trail. But that didn't seem to be the case. It looked like the Democratic candidate won there fairly handily. I think collectively, there's something very interesting that we have learned about America right now. It isn't simply enough to convince somebody that they should be unhappy. You have to provide them with a new alternative, something that they can vote for. In this election, all of the signs pointed to the fact that you could have had a Republican victory similar to 1994. But whereas in 1994, Newt Gingrich was able to offer something like a contract with America, What Republicans offered this time was basically Trump 2.5, made in America in 1958. And the lack of any real new idea or something new that we could try as a country that might take us in a different direction really harmed the Republicans. And so going forward, what it tells me is that if Donald Trump is the standard bearer in 2024, and if the Republicans can't come up with a new set of platform positions to run on, they might get beaten pretty badly. They're going to continue to trim their sails a little bit. But if they can succeed, they might have a much better faring.
So is that sort of like the adage of don't just come to me with the problem, come to me with the solution?
Come to me with a solution. And there was very little that the Republicans were offering that was different than the same solutions they'd provided in 2012 or 2016 or 2020. And I think America is looking for something new. I expect there's going to be very little in the way of major legislative achievement. Assuming that the Republicans do take control of the House, the leadership of the House has already signaled that they don't have any new legislation, but they are planning on investigating anybody related to Joe Biden, his family, his business interests. In the Senate just simply won't have enough seats under Democratic or Republican control to move any kind of major agenda. So we should really expect the next 2 years to almost be lame duck with more of the same televised committee hearings that we have seen in the last couple of years of the Trump administration or during the Biden administration. We haven't seen any of the kind of newly minted candidates suggest that they're running on their own steam enough that they're going to have their own identity. That said, there have been a number of incumbents who ran for re-election that, because of the size of their victory or because of the nature of their victory, might have just been elevated to the national stage. So up in New Hampshire, Sununu, who's the governor of New Hampshire, won convincingly as a Republican in a state that usually votes for the Democratic Party. And he is suddenly now being considered as a possible moderate alternative for the presidency. There's a lot of suggestion that the Democrats aren't actually happy with Joe Biden. And the governor of Minnesota has elevated her to somebody who, because of the size and the strength of her victory, might actually be a potential candidate for the Democratic Party for the presidency in 2024 if Biden doesn't run. I think Mitch McConnell really did a great job of putting a point on this. Mitch McConnell's argument was that the Republican Party had just done a bad job of nominating people for important offices, and that the Senate candidates that he had to work with were some of the worst that he had ever seen. And the other side understood and had picked up on that and used the inexperience or the polarizing effect of some of the candidates who are running for the Republicans to their advantage, which is part of the reason why they perhaps didn't fare as poorly as many thought the Dems were going to. If the Republicans can learn from that lesson, then what we should expect them to see is to go back to their normal wheelhouse of successful business individuals or people who have lower government experience or individuals who served in previous administrations rather than picking more Oz's or Lakes to try to run for public office, in which case the 2024 race might actually be kind of a return to seriousness. From what we can tell, turnout was actually pretty good. The nationwide numbers, we're going through this period of higher voter turnout for the last couple of years. So if you compare midterm election turnouts to 10, 20 years ago, turnout is going to be very high. It may not quite be as high as it was in 2018, but based on historical national averages, it looks like both early voting turnout and turnout in general were higher than normal for the United States. Typically, we assume, especially at midterm elections, that these are pocketbook elections, that people are voting on the question, are you better off now than you were 2 years ago? And certainly most Americans today, I think, would say that no, we're less financially secure, inflation is very high, I'm not sure how my investments are doing. And if this election were simply about economics, I think the Republicans would have gotten the result they were expecting. They would have picked up 20 or 30 more seats in the House. They'd have won 2 or 3 seats in the Senate. The fact that the race is as close as it is right now suggests to me that there's more than just the economy at play, and that there are bigger issues and bigger questions about personal freedom or the direction of American democracy, or not just how secure do I feel now, but how secure am I going to feel for my children 10 or 15 years from now, and that these kinds of issues were more important than maybe what some of the exit polls are suggesting. If it was all about the economy, the Republicans should have won in a landslide. That one of the challenges that the Democratic Party is facing is they have this vision of a better America, and all they can tell us is that their better America is better.
Different than making it great again.
It's different. But exactly how that works, or what society looks like, or how do I talk to a stranger whenever I'm not allowed to use gender-based pronouns, what do I replace this world with? I don't know if they're giving us a clear vision of that. They're just simply telling us that it's going to be better. And not being able to tell us what better means, I think is scaring people. One of the things that often confuses partisans or politicians is because our elections are designed to provide certainty and finality around a candidate, oftentimes public opinion is not in alignment with election or electoral outcomes. And you can be lulled into this false sense that because my side is winning elections, my side has the support of the people on important cultural values. And that's often not actually true. It's simply that your side is more organized, or that the rules benefit your side, or that your minority is bigger than the other minority, and most people would rather not be a part of either group. And we miss out on what the people actually want. Instead, we get what the partisans are arguing about.